Good morning and welcome to the CRC Planning and Management series of broadcasts. This is the first one of 6 that following the Community Resource Centre conference that was held in Busselton recently, and I'm presuming that most of you would have been at our training session, that I'm going to present these 3 of these presentations for you, and then predominantly risk management, planning and governance of events. Terry will then come along and do 3 others, which are looking through promotion, managing sponsors, stakeholders, the sort of thing that he did at the conference. Just a short note that this is the very first one, so if we suddenly go off the air or go blank or run out of words, you'll have to forgive us and we'll start again. But in the meantime, my background is quite diverse, as I probably gave you a bit of an inkling at the conference, but for these sessions I'm drawing on my risk management and business development sort of experience to guide you through the processes and the principles of event planning and management. We didn't get a lot of time at the conference to actually talk in detail about things, so today we've got a bit more space. My passion for this topic, however, though, stems from my involvement in developing and running a diverse range of events over my lifetime. You've all probably been there with the kids at school and the P&C, right through to big festivals. And more recently, I'm actually running some events overview of risk management plans for Events Corps. And what we're realising is we're all in this together at the beginning. So if you haven't quite got it right, it doesn't really matter, we're all going to learn together. So whether you're just having a promotion in your resource centre or you're involved in a major festival, you should find something useful in these programs. The session can be as interactive as you want it to be. So please jump in with questions, comments, any observations that you have that's going to add value to these sessions. So the more questions and the more interaction we have, the more diverse it can be. There is a phone number if you've just got a pen handy. It's 1800 67 8208. And when you come online, if you'd just like to just tell us who you are, where you're from, and then tell us what your issue or question is, and we'll do our best to answer that for you. So let's kick off on today's session. Project planning will give you a perspective of formalising a process that tends to be just happening, and enthusiasm and the need to just get going will often lead to some confusion somewhere down the line when you've missed a few opportunities or some parts of the processes that later come back and bite you. And many times some of the committees can even come to blows over things because they don't remember what was actually said. If you follow some of these processes that I'm going to show you, not only will you have evidence of where you're going and where you've been, you're also going to achieve your objectives in a much better way. Whether you're a committee or a team, you're going to actually need some strong leadership to actually do this, because if you've done it all before, that's what people are going to tell you. We've done this before, so why should we do it differently? So always, if you do what you've always done, you're going to get what you always got. So what we want to try and do is to actually say to the committees or the teams, let's just stop and pretend that we've never done this before and start working on it as a project. So we might just kick to our PowerPoints. And what we'll do is, there's not too much on these PowerPoints, so there's probably not a value in saying let's send them all out to you. But just for you to know that any information that comes out of here and some of the sheets and things that we're going to be talking about can be sourced through Rosalind. The other thing, if you've got it handy and you might just need a minute to get it, is the Event Management Framework document, that pretty picture with all the colours that we gave you at the training workshop. We're going to flick to that in a few slides' time to be able to go through it. So if you just need to rattle around your drawer and get it, it'd be good to get it right now. So let's just kick off and see where we're going. The first thing that you've got to do is set your committee structure for your event. This is irrelevant to the committee structure that you have in your CRC or in your festival committee as a whole. Each different event should have a committee that's been set so that you actually can structure it focused on exactly where you're going. What you first need is to determine who the event team is. And so we're going to go through a sheet which is available from Rosalind. So I'm just going to talk you through it so you can take notes, but you can follow up with the actual sheet. Then we're going to use our coloured chart to map the event activities that will actually take you through the whole process. And at the end, I'm going to come back and focus a bit on setting the event objectives after you've been on that journey, because that's the actual success factor that's going to make a difference. First, wanting to know where you're going, and then after we've actually set those objectives, working out some ways of we can see, did we get there and what will we do different next time. So we'll kick off with the event planning for community groups and the committee structure. The very first thing that you need to do is have a leader. Now that may not be the chairman or the person who is in charge of the CRC or the event. You just might say, we're going to have, for this particular event, a role of leader, and their activities are to create and maintain the framework for team activities, and that will become clear as we go. They manage the committee or the team. So just like you would in your workplace of managing any sort of project, you treat it like that. They call and facilitate the meetings. If they're not there, they have to have a deputy that stands in and follows the same process. They handle or delegate any of the administrative details. They may participate actively in the event, and in some instances they may not. They may just be the administrative side. And they have to report back to the president or the board or the funding body as appropriate. The other thing that you might consider in this is a mentor or a quality advisor that is not involved in the event. So if you've got somebody in your town or in your, around your committee or something who has got good experience in project management or running events and such like, they can actually be there to guide you in these early stages. The bigger the event, the more important that becomes. They attend the team meetings, but they're not the leader, or are they a team member? And they don't have voting rights. So they're your observer, and they're the people that are there for guidance only. They observe the team's progress, and so they will actually not only be looking at how you're going in managing your event, but they'll be looking at how you interact with each other. And they help the team to function more effectively. They focus on the process through the whole thing, and if you miss steps, they're the ones that will be saying, what about this bit? We need to go and do some more work. They support and advise the leader in relation to developing and monitoring the outcomes and processes. They support the professional and personal development of team members as well as appropriate. And this is particularly important when you've got a lot of community members on your committees who are very good people, they've got lots of experience in life, but maybe they've never done this before. So they can get a lot of learning out of this opportunity. They also can deputise for the leader if they're absent from meetings to ensure that continuity of leadership in there. So if any of this actually draws up any questions that you've got, don't forget that number and just ring in and we can clarify anything for you. Now, what do the team members do? Well, obviously they contribute fully to the event, they share their knowledge and they share their expertise. That's the first thing. The reason they're on the committee is to do one of those three things. The next thing that they do is they participate in the development and the maintenance of the processes and the products and the outcomes of the event. They attend to tasks as are delegated and they report on the progress. And that last one, reporting on progress, is really important. You don't want to hear those terms such as, don't worry, I've got it under control, it'll all be all right on the day. We just need to be actually saying, well, show me how it's under control. Because some people who are out of their depth particularly will just keep sort of reassuring you, hoping that they're reassuring themselves, and then you get to crunch time and they're not where they need to be. So you gently have to ask for evidence of how they're going. They ask questions as they need to fully understand their role or what's happening in the event or what their contribution is. They offer suggestions, they offer ideas, they have resources for consideration by the team. Now, in saying that, when you actually get all these team members together, if you've got a big event to do, it's a good idea to actually give different people what we call portfolios. So you might have one that's handling marketing and promotion, somebody that's looking after the sponsors, somebody that's looking after the products that you might use, venues, catering, etc. It's a lot easier to run an event if certain people are focusing. And what they may do is they may end up building a team that is outside the committee to support them. So suddenly your hands-on becomes a lot bigger and a lot wider, as long as you're controlling that process and making sure that it comes back to the committee in a reporting process. So that's about how you structure it and how you set it up. So how do we actually make sure our event is manageable and sustainable? It's essential that the groundwork is done beforehand, before you move headlong into the process. You may remember at the training workshop we showed you that determining context form that you all filled out. A lot of that information that comes out of there gives you your background. So a brainstorm on that sort of thing at the beginning is a good way to start to find out what you don't know rather than what you do know. So you select your team leader if they've not already been elected to this event by it being a repeat event. If we're talking about a very small thing in a team, it just might be the nominated person who you have determined is going to lead the role. So you need to take this from when we're talking about committees and elected members and all these sort of things, just scale it down to being team members and members of the team, so to fit your need. So you get your team leader, you nominate the other roles. It's handy for the leader to have some thought as to what roles have I got. So that could even be part of your determining the context episode. Determine the nature of your event, the outcomes and the expectations. That's something, again, we can't stress enough, is to understand what you're doing it for. When we get to the event management framework in a moment, what we're going to do is we're actually going to sit and go through each section of that, and that's the opportunity for you to really have a good look at each component of this. Then you need a charter or a mission statement or something that says the reason we're doing this is, and it's for, and the benefits will be. So you can keep that at every committee meeting, so if people bring up things that are out of left field or they forget where they're going, you can keep reminding them and bringing back, this is what we're here for. Because people get so enthusiastic that they add bits because they say, oh, well, while we're having an event, we can do this and we can do that and we can add a few things onto it. And before you know it, your event looks nothing like what you thought it was going to look like. And that's where the risks come in, because you're actually forgetting what you're about. So, we've got the charter, we know how we've got the scope of the event, we've got the boundaries of the event from our context, we know what's feasible to undertake. Most events fail because people chew up too much. They take this big bite and it's a bit like trying to eat an elephant. They're going to get right to the end of it, but it's a massive meal. If you're looking at an ongoing event, you need to start an achievable thing and grow, rather than start at the biggest right at the beginning. So we're going to eat the elephant a little bit at a time. And that's what a lot of this is about. So then we also need to know what fits into our event when we develop it. And political pressures can come on you with a lot of these things where people say, well, I've got a real passion about this, you must include it. If you've got a clear charter of where you're going, you can actually point out to them that it doesn't fit, or you can ask them where it fits and let them come to that conclusion. Or an easy out is to say, it may not fit in our plans this year, but perhaps we can include it next year if it comes down the track. So that's a diplomatic thing of saying, I hope you forget about it next year. So we can just go from there. Once we've got a roadmap to be developed, a bit like that framework with all of our sort of boxes and things like that, do the same for your event. So the very first thing, as we've said, is what is the event? And again, we'll go through that in a minute. Why are we doing it? How will we do it? Where's it going to be held? When will it begin and end? You know, have we got any issues with it being sort of over different times and lightings, for example? I'll give you a quick example of an event that actually is a real-life event that happened last year up in Broome, and it was a basketball event, televised, international, all of that sort of thing. And some of the locals were mentioning to the event holders, well, you know, we get heavy dew that comes in the late afternoon, so you need to watch it. They didn't really make their point very clearly to the organisers who were not from the area. So when it actually came to that game day, they started the event, they ended up with towels trying to wipe off the courts. It was a basketball event, and the players started falling over. They had to abandon the event before an international television audience for that session. The fortunate thing is they had a good risk management plan in place, so for day 2, they just rearranged things and played it earlier in the day. But it was a major embarrassment for the whole of, well, Australia really, because it was going to China and all these sort of things. There was kind of notion that there was something could happen, but nobody really gave enough concrete evidence, and no real research was done by the event organisers to find out how often does that happen. It's about to run again in a couple of weeks up there. There's a whole different schedule now to make sure that that doesn't happen. So the time of when it begins and ends is really critical. To things change in different parts of the days or over days and such like. Who we need to liaise with include Delegate responsibility too needs to be clearly linked out as well, because as we've said on a few occasions and will continue to say, anybody you subcontract, delegate or whatever, they may be responsible for certain things, but you are the principal contractor, and so if things go wrong, it comes back to you as well. So how will we know if it's effective, all of the things we're putting into place? You need to put some tests in place. You need to ask for feedback. I'm not sure if I've shared this example with you, but the Woolarama down in Wagen, big event, 20,000 people go there. And one meeting that we had with them looking at risk management with all of the stakeholders, we were talking about the St John's ambulance being there and what sort of injuries or accidents might have happened. Well, they hadn't ever checked with the people to say, well, what did you find there? Except for asking once or twice, and the St John's ambulance people saying, oh, Privacy Act, we can't tell you that stuff. When in fact they can tell you incidences without identifying people. So if you've got a risk and you've got somebody addressing it, you have to go back and ask them, did it work? Or what did we find? Because otherwise, as event holders, you think nothing's ever happened out there. There's never been the incidents and it's all good. So closing the loop is really important. Where's the event going to be carried out? Again, we talked quite a lot about that the location, you've got traffic issues, you've got to look at people getting there, accommodation, all of those sort of things. Make sure that if you're having a big event to attract loads of people, that there is enough accommodation in the town for people that come from long distances. Or you can set up a camping ground or something like that. So key issues you need to be looking at. Other one, funding, the almighty dollar. Where's it going to come from? Is it definite it's going to be there? Are you going to use the funds for what the funders intend you to do? So that's, if you get money for marketing and promotion, you can't spend it somewhere else because you've got to acquit that money. So be very clear on what funding you've got, where the opportunities are, and when you get the money, what the funders want from it. Target audience, again, who's it for? Make sure that the activities are appropriate for those sort of people, as well as the venue. And how long should it take for this event to come to fruition? Many people start their organisation of their event too late. For example, your approvals from councils and things like that, you may have to allow up to 3 months in some instances. I hear all the time from local governments, because they're a big client base of mine, that they say people come in a week before the event and say, can you approve this? It might have to go through 5 departments and all sorts of things might have to happen. So you don't want to have your event cancelled because you haven't got approvals. And if you haven't got approvals, you've got issues with your insurance because you haven't complied with local laws and things like that. So there's quite a lot to that. How long is it going to take? Always allow a little bit extra time. And if it's an ongoing event, look back in last year's, and that's why this structure allows you to see what happened last year, to find out how did we go and adjust it accordingly. So that's quite a lot of preparatory work that you need to do. That's the bits that get missed in a lot of ways, because what we're doing is we're saying, let's get to the good bit, let's get to the doing. But the planning should be at least 60% of your event. The rest happens as you go along. Another thing that you need to have is a dispute resolution process. When you do come to an impasse with contractors, committee members, community members or whatever, this is where your mentor or your quality advisor could step into that role as well. If you don't have somebody from external, on the committee you can have somebody that can be that person that watches the process and does the dispute resolution. But really important that the whole committee doesn't get involved in it, and that's when you have your bun fight sitting at the committee table. And you can lose committee members if they don't feel that they've had a hearing, and then you can be in some trouble. So we've now got the roadmap where we're going. The next thing we need to know is what resources we need. We've talked a bit about money, that's a key one. But we need hands-on, we might need giveaways, we might need to have our printing done and all of that sort of thing. So once we've got our roadmap and all of our things, our event management framework will take us to identifying the different pieces that we want. So following that tick box, we shouldn't miss anything. Determine our meeting times and the frequency of them is another really important thing, and mandating people to come or send a proxy wherever possible. Not too many meetings in some instances in the early stages, because if you've got it all set up, people should know what they need to do. Think about alternatives to face-to-face meetings, because everybody's busy these days. Teleconferences are a good way. It could be doing them at different times, rotating it to get different people there. But the most important thing is keeping up the communication. So another thing that you can have is a communication plan. People can send reports in to you periodically if you're the leader to make sure they're on track. The sort of minutes that you would come with out of those things, I don't actually like the minutes form where we write down that Bill said something, Fred said something, moving from there. What I prefer to see is where that you have an action sheet that says what was the issue discussed, what was the resolution out of that, who has to do what by when, and then the final box says, is it done? That way you've got an ongoing building action sheet that is actually there. You can tick off things as you go, but more importantly, from anybody coming in late to the committee or starting it off the next year, they can go back through the history and see how quickly things were resolved. So you're getting this really good, robust record keeping. It doesn't have to be in a very formal process. It can be handwritten, put in a box, one of those clip boxes or a file, and it's there. Everybody gets a copy. And before the meeting, as we always do, we go, oh my God, what was I supposed to do? Have a look. You've got clear actions, your name's against it, and it will get done. Not when they get to the meeting and the minutes are read out and we're going, oh yeah, well, sorry, I didn't quite get to that. It's more likely to prompt people to do things. So once the tasks are assigned, whether it's from the action sheet or whether it's from the portfolio, you've got accountability. People have got a name on it. When they're named and they don't achieve, it's amazing how much that does motivate people to achieve. If somebody suddenly leaves the committee as well, you've actually got a way of looking back and seeing what has somebody else got to pick up and not find out on event day that something hasn't happened. And the last thing in our checklist of the organising committee is determining the reporting requirements and the structure of how the reports come in. So do we want it informally? Are we happy with emails? Are our action sheets needing to be signed off? This becomes particularly important when you start dealing with your subcontractors, other people outside your committee or your team that are doing things for you. You want to set up the same sort of system so that you've got an audit trail so that if there's any issues or problems, you can see exactly where it comes from. So I think that if we sum that up on our slide here, the key to success is to have those clear, defined roles and responsibilities. This will empower individuals and it will build teamwork because everybody will know what they're doing and you won't have the patch wars that you have of somebody treading on each other's territory. And it shares the workload and it shares the responsibility. And my experience of committees and things like that is that very often it's one or two people working their butt off and lots of other people sitting around taking the collective credit. So if people aren't prepared to work and do these levels of things, you'd need to question why they're on your group or committee in the first place. You can give those, if they've got work commitments, can't come to meetings, give them things to do that don't require that, and then you'll get more productivity out of the whole committee. So if there's any questions out of that section that comes to mind, just remember that the number is 1800 678 208, and we'd love to hear from anybody out there any thoughts on that. So we'll just give you a couple of minutes to just reflect on that and see whether we've got anybody brave enough to make the very first call through to the broadcast. Not hearing any sounds out there? Okay, we'll move on to the next one. But if as we go through the next framework, something that comes to mind, don't forget you can call in at any point during the broadcast. The system is set up so there's a little board that comes up that says somebody's online, and then we can just appropriately cut in and talk to you. So don't feel shy about ringing in. So our next part of this broadcast is the event management framework, as we called it. So this is where you get out your fancy little coloured chart that we gave out to you, and we're going to go around all of the different sections of it. Now, for those that don't have it, we have it up here on the screen. It is a bit busy, so you may not be able to read every box, but I'm going to go through them all, and you can then just scribble on it or scribble on a bit of paper, and again, if anything comes to mind, give us a call. So this is a very useful tool, and just before I go a bit further, it just reminds me that if you want a copy of this and you haven't got one, you email Rosalind and she will send one out to you. It's very good for that leadership thing about stopping and starting again, when you can say, somebody else said I have to do this and not me. You take the blame to somebody else. So we'll start off with the setting the event objectives. I'm going to talk to you in the last session of this broadcast on setting your objectives, but this will give you just some idea of where it fits in the picture. So the first thing you have to sort of decide, what's the objective of running this event? It might be a new service that we want to go out to the community and we want to tell them about it and give them some background of it. It might be a particular community message, so it might be a health message, or a working smarter with technology or something that somebody's got. Any program that somebody brings up. Could be any form of community message that you want to get out there that you might have a lot of stakeholders that want to get engaged with. You might have promoting your own service. You might have just reopened your telecentre. You might have some fantastic new product that you want to do. So treat it like an event, and then you'll actually get the maximum benefit out of it. Could be a community development initiative. It could be a festival, it could be an education, learning, it could just be showcasing your region, anything like that. So that actually tells you why you're doing something, and it gives you a bit of an idea of what the scope will be. Obviously, if it's a small end of thing, you're going to concentrate a lot more on getting a message out and getting the right people there. If it's about bringing the community together, you want as much diversity as possible. So it will set that sort of tendency for you to know where you're going. And the objectives, as we said before, it might be educational, it might be about community wellbeing, it might be about selling a product. Be very clear what your objectives are, otherwise you'll get lost in the fun. And whilst that might be good, you won't achieve what you want to achieve. The next thing is, how are you going to do this? Because the bottom line of all of these things is budget and funding. No matter how much we wrap it up, if we don't have any money to do stuff, there's lots we can do, but it's not going to reach the scope. You won't run a festival like it, but you might run a promoting your service. And Terry spoke a lot about that, and he'll do that in some of the next things about bartering your way around. So sometimes it's dollars, and sometimes it's about, I'll do this and you do that and we share. But the first thing before you do any of that is you've got to try and work out how much might it cost. Another example I can give you of a huge festival that encompasses a huge amount of the region. Lots of little events coming together, and there was an idea and there was some funding available as a one-off to bring it all under one umbrella to promote tourism to the region. And an entity took on the whole lot. The first year they got $80,000 worth of funding because it was new, the funding was put aside for that initiative, and it was very successful. The second year of running it, they haven't got that big initial seed funding, and they're trying to do the same thing as they did the year before with about $30,000 funding. So you can imagine they're in some degree of trouble trying to even pay for the resources. They've gone out and ordered all the same stuff, but all of a sudden, all the bills where they had lots of money, the printing and that sort of thing, they don't have the luxury of that this year. But they didn't realise that till they were halfway through planning the event. So if it's an annual event, make sure that if you want it bigger and better, you've got to match the dollars of last year and add more. So that's, I can't stress enough, try and work out what it might cost. And even though you probably don't get your grants until later after you've set your objectives, have a contingency plan. If we don't get this amount of dollars, what goes and what stays? For your contractors and stakeholders, we're now down on the third box down of there. The very first thing is looking at, so we're in the orange box, so we're looking at roles and responsibilities, insurance, legislative compliance and communication with your stakeholders and your contractors. Now, a stakeholder, as we've determined, is somebody who has an influence on your event or an interest in your event. These are definitely the ones that have more of the influence, because if any of these things don't work, your event is in jeopardy. So contractors might be people like they bring their bouncy castles, they set up your tents, they do all those sort of things. Or they might actually be people that contribute through a process of providing event management, for example. One recent example that we've just had as well is where there's all these sort of contractual arrangements and what we would call commercial arrangements in place, but they're contracting non-incorporated bodies. They're not official entities, and there's thousands of dollars changing hands. And if the objectives aren't met, you've actually got very little comeback in that. So make sure your commercial arrangements are in place with a memorandum of understanding or a shared agreement or something of the nature that says this is what we expect for you, this is how much we're going to pay for it, and this is how we expect you to behave. And you need to be following these guidelines of your industry or your association. We need to see your insurance certificate of currency, and we need to make sure that you are complying with the legislation that you should comply with, whether that be safety and health. For example, in staging, for somebody to be able to put up staging, they have to have the white cards from safety and health to make sure that they're working appropriately. If they don't and there's an accident, you can't say that's their problem. It becomes yours because you're the principal contractor. And if you didn't make sure that they had it, you can actually have some liability. So you really need to be looking at that thing. How you communicate with them should be in writing at all times, whether it's email or whether it's writing, and then they should come back to you and confirm that they've received your instructions and that they agree with them. So that's why a memorandum of understanding, and I've seen those out there where you send it out and presume it's going to happen, but you don't close the loop. Closing the loop is having a signed statement to say they've read it, they agree with it, and that they will abide by it. And make sure that the MOU is with you, not with a subby in between. So be careful there. And on the day, it's really important with all your stakeholders and your contractors and everything else that you keep in touch with them as well and make sure that they're briefed and they know what to do if there's any problems. So communication plan for your contractors and your stakeholders, very, very important. Moving down now to the red box. I'm not sure whether that was read for a purpose or not because they're the ones that give you grief most. So it is perhaps a bit of alert. First thing to recall on that one is you have a duty of care to your volunteers and your staff in the event arena just the same as if they were employees. The legislation under Safety and Health and the Volunteers Act does give you that mandate. So they need briefing. You need to be looking after their safety and health and you need to make sure that they're looked after. They also need clear roles and responsibilities on the day. It's amazing, especially in volunteer world, how you get role creep. There are some people that want to take care of all sorts that they really don't have the skills and knowledge to do, all in good faith, but very dangerous on the day. But they also like to have a clarity about what you expect from them. And this again is giving all of these things I'm talking about is giving you an evidence trail that you've done all these things. So if something goes horribly wrong and you end up in law courts or in investigations or albeit coroner's courts, which can happen, you can actually demonstrate that you've done the best you could with the information available and that protects you enormously. And we'll talk more about that in our liability session in a few weeks' time. The skills and knowledge of these staff and volunteers is important as well. You don't expect volunteers and community people to come with everything that you need, but if they are doing things that require certain skills and knowledge, just be very sure that if you're going to defend anything that you can stand up and say this person was doing that and we made sure that they had the right skills to do it. Otherwise there can be some negligence factors can float around. Not to alarm you though, because things that happen in events are rare. The one that's recently happened up north in that marathon where those ladies were horribly burnt has really put this high on the agenda, which is why you're now seeing everybody requiring the risk management plans in a much more robust way. Out of a tragedy really has come a good thing in raising the awareness, but I stress that those tragedies are rare. So as long as you just do the best you can, you're generally okay. The next thing, and I think this is more applicable to CRCs than it is to general events, is about your special guests. And a lot of times, as I understand it, you might have politicians and people that might need to come to your events, or you'd like them to come to endorse what you're doing. A lot of the funding you get comes from government departments, so you would think that you would like to have representatives there. And certainly from some of the contracts I've seen, it's a mandate of your funding that you allow those people to come. So don't be frightened to invite right to the top. Invite the Prime Minister if you want to. They have a choice whether they come. And in an election year, you'll be very surprised that premiers, prime ministers and very senior ministers pop up all over the place and add kudos to your event. Also, people worry if they invite too many, what if they all come? Well, they're not going to. You'd probably find that you might get maybe 20 to 30% in some cases of the people you invite. So invite everybody. It'll be a nice thing at an event to have too many people turn up there, except if they all need to use the toilets and such like and you haven't got enough. Be mindful of that sort of thing, that you have some contingency plans if you're going to invite massive numbers. But for the sort of things that I think you'll be inviting these people for, that shouldn't be a problem. You look at then about the quality of your event invitation. Don't send it out on a scrappy piece of paper. Make sure that it's actually looking very, not so much official, it can have your stamp of whatever it is, but it actually looks well presented. Make sure there's plenty of time as well, because a lot of people, especially the higher up you go, the political chain or in companies and things, their diaries are booked out a long way in advance. So the minute that you actually get some idea of when your event's going to be, you can even send out a pre-invitation to say, we're having an exciting event coming up, put it in your calendar for this day because you'll be receiving an invitation. And you mightn't have your invitations printed or anything like that, but they'll pencil it in, and if it interests them, they will look out for your invitation and you've got more chance of it coming. From your RSVP point of view, make sure that you know for your catering and for everything else who's coming, so give enough time to notify your contractors in the food or whoever's preparing everything. The same as for car parking or whatever. When you've got your RSVPs, you'll know whether to panic or not, and then your contingency plan will kick in. Worse still, if nobody replies, there's nothing more embarrassing to turn up on a day to an event and nobody comes. So you might have to, if you have the RSVPs, maybe a few days before you really need them, you can do a ring around and start to get some interest. The other important thing on special guests is what trigger do you have to push to get them to come? So it's got to be something of their interest. So if you're targeting certain politicians, do a little bit of research and find out what their interests are and try and make your events somehow fit their portfolio or their personal interests, because that's a really important factor. And sometimes that's where your objectives and your triggers might line up. Look at special interest groups out there, and if your event has any remote connection with them, it's an opportunity to just get more people involved. So that side of the framework is really enormous amounts of the actual housekeeping things that we need to do. And if you can actually either delegate each one of those, remember we spoke before about the ability for having portfolios. These boxes, apart from the first one of setting the event objectives, that is actually something everybody has to do. But you can actually pull each one of these boxes out and give them to a committee member and say, okay, well, we're going to predominantly put you as that portfolio. Doesn't mean they control it. It just means that they do the work around it and they feed that back into the event. So when we switch over now to the opposite side, we'll go down the blue boxes. We talk about advertising and event promotion. So the message, this is what message are we sending out there? Where do we have to put it? When do we have to get it there? Now I know Terry's going to talk a lot about it, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about this in the context of what we're doing here. But we need a strategy for it. It's not an ad hoc pluck what we can do, so we should be setting up a plan. We need to engage the local media pre and post the event, and do it as soon as we have got an inkling of what we're doing. Local media love a scoop, so they love to be on board, and it really is really good for them to sort of come out and be able to do a lot of their print stuff coming up around your event, especially in a small town. Don't discount the fact that the media in surrounding towns and regional centres will be interested as well, because people do like to actually look at, if you were, let's say, for example, you might be in Cranbrook or Kojonup or somewhere like that, get it into the Katanning Regional Centre news, or you look at the supertown sort of structures, they're looking to engage more with a lot of the other local areas. So think a bit wider than just the local rag. Make sure you know what your message is, and your message should be 100% linked to your objectives. While saying that though, if there's an opportunity for some free media space, and again Terry will talk about this, you can always make your event fit anything if there's an opportunity to promote it. but don't change your objectives, just change the slant on it. And once you've got that advertising strategy and where you're going and what you're doing, again, portfolio opportunity for somebody to look out for, to monitor, to be the key spokesperson for your committee. The leader, the chairman, the president, be careful you don't usurp their role in that, in being in front of the media, otherwise you have the internal fight. So the portfolio is actually getting the strategy out. You have to have some sort of media policy with your committee or your CRCs, who is the person that does the ad hoc stuff, and closer to the event, who's the face of the event. And it's generally not the person who's running around doing all the work there. Promotional materials. Giveaways, everybody wants to come and do giveaways, but my experience is it can be the most expensive part of your event with a little return. Because it's like a competition. When you're paying $4 or $5 for a little gadget to give away that somebody's going to just chuck in the bottom of their bag or not do very much with, you're not getting a lot of value for money. So sometimes giveaways can be information sheets, or they can be the things that you can barter with your traders and things like that. Terry talked at the conference about having a goodie bag where you can collect lots of stuff and put in there. They're always nice because people get an element of surprise. And you also don't want the people who roam around just collecting all the giveaways and never stop to talk to you and get the message across. So think about the usefulness of them, the cost of them, and how they will link to achieving your objectives. Sometimes they're just giveaways, and that's fine if you got them for free, but if you're paying for them, they must promote your objectives. If it's promotional material that you're doing, make sure that it's actually not controversial in any way, that it's appropriate for the audience, and that any stakeholders that have got any sort of information available is included in your promotional things, because there's competition and patch wars happens with those people as well. So make sure you understand them where you're doing it. These days with online sort of things, that informative resources and lists of websites and things like that is really probably better value for you in some cases. And I think it's about $5 you can actually buy one of those little sticks that go in your computer, your USB. And a lot of people have started putting information on those, and you give them away, and then whilst people say, hey, that's good, that's useful for me, they will have a look at your information. Often pamphlets and things like that, they end up in the bin, and they're getting less and less effective. So you need to look at how important is the strategy that you've got on your promotional materials. Okay, now where we've done the advertising on if we flick back to our chart again, we're now coming up to the more exciting bit of the event management, where we're actually looking at the activities and the catering and the venue. This is when you're really getting into it. We've done all our planning. So on our activities, if we're using presenters, we need to make sure that we've got everything set up for them and find out what they need, what they're doing, and you need to vet what they're doing a little bit as well when you come to presenters, because some people like to use it as a soapbox to sell their own events. They're there really to do something to add value to your objectives. So you need to brief them of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. If they're hands-on activities, you just need to actually understand, are there any implications with it? A rare one, but one that does come up, is face painting having problems with it. And that can be as simple as, what sort of face paints are they going to use? Are you sure that they're actually safe and there's no allergy reactions that can happen for them? In the main they are, but it's something that in your dealings with the person that's going to do it, you might actually make that as part of your conditions, that they need to ensure that they're using paints that have a low allergy factor. If people have got toys and bits and pieces, you would be asking them to make sure that they actually haven't got small bits if there's kids involved and such like. Show bags, as you know from the show, they have to be vetted by a committee to make sure that they're all safe. Displays and exhibitions, you make the people responsible for around their area for keeping it tidy and for making sure that they're actually acting in a professional manner. And that nobody trips over the display, that's a pretty obvious one, so you don't have cords and things. When you're looking at your venue, make sure it's appropriate to where you're holding, what you're holding in that venue, for safety, for access and egress, for lighting, all those things we've talked about you know, whether people can access in car parks. If you're going to have cars parked around your event, make sure it's not in a paddock with dry grass so it catches fire and burns out the neighbouring farm's crop and things like that. So have a look at all those things. But a key one, and one that I experienced travelling all over the state and for community resource centres, is signage. You get to town, everybody thinks, well, everybody knows where we are. But guess what? People coming from out of town don't know where you are. So it'd be really nice if the building is well signposted, which it mostly is. But even if you've got an event on, that you put up some signage somewhere on the line that's saying to the resource centre or to the venue, it really does help, because people just give up otherwise and just drive straight through. And lastly, in our little chart round here, we're talking about catering now in the little blue box. There's food, you've got to know what food and beverage you're looking at, because with that brings responsibilities. We have things such as the Liquor Act, and that's been fairly well documented, is making sure what your responsibilities are there. Legislative responsibilities under the Food Act, for example, and we need to look at those as well when we're running an event. There's always that controversy about the cake stalls and bits and pieces. The local environmental health officer at your shires will be able to lead you through all of that sort of thing. And who's providing the food? Is it being prepared appropriately? More importantly, check your local businesses first. Don't bring caterers in from outside if somebody in your community has the capability of doing it. It might be not as flash and maybe slightly dearer, but you are about community development, and you do really need to make sure that you're giving your local businesses that opportunity. So that's just a talk around our whole chart, and again, happy if anybody wants to chat about that. If anybody wants to chat with me and they're a bit shy about coming on the online thing, you can get my contact details again through Roslyn, and we can actually take that from there. So the last part in this last 10 minutes of our broadcast, I'm just going to quickly go through with you about setting your objectives. We talk about goals and objectives, and everybody said, yes, we really know about that, but when you actually ask people who are running events, what are your goals and objectives, they become quite fuzzy after a while. And some of them were aimed so high that they were never achievable in the first place. So you've probably seen this before, the SMART goals. And sometimes the words are a bit different in this, but these are the ones that I like. And that is that they are specific. So it's not a vague goal. You can actually, everybody in the committee can say, these are our objectives. We know where we're going. We know why we're doing it. After the event, you need to monitor this to see how you went. So you've got to have some measures in place. Now, the measures might be that you attracted the right sort of people. So there might not be numbers. They might be qualitative more than quantitative. So how many people came? Did we have the stuff there we wanted? Did all the people turn up and get what they wanted? Terry will talk a lot more about that, and has, but you do need to also look at the actual objectives of your committee. Did they work well together? Did you achieve all the bits of the event you wanted? If not, why not? The achievability of things, if it's the first time you've done something, it'd be fair to say that you don't know what you can achieve. So again, be a little bit understated and surprise people if you get a lot more. But this is where the events can get out of hand, is because often you'll start off with one thing and people will keep adding and adding and adding until you're spread so thin you're not going to achieve anything. So best to have a smaller event at high quality and build on it for next year than to have a massive event that kind of misses the mark right across the board. Realistic links a bit to the last point. You know, it's no good saying we can change the world if we can't. So and it's no good saying we can do big stuff with no money, because we can't. But what we can do is be clear to our message and be clear to our objectives and engagement and whatever we're trying to do. And the timeliness of our goals is a little bit linked to what I said before about the timelines of when your event takes place and all of the things that need to happen leading up. Many events have to drop things off at the last minute because they've never really got round to finishing it. So every little component of all of these boxes should have a timeline on somewhere. And you should have a Gantt chart or a timeline chart that says, at this part we need to be here, and then when you go to your committee meetings, you're going to actually be able to say, gee, we're running a bit behind, we need to do extra work, not drop things off. So that's where the she'll be right on the day thing doesn't apply to successful risk management or management. While saying that, it's always right on the day. because the people coming don't know what they were coming to anyway in most cases. So don't panic if some things don't go off. Just make a conscious effort to drop it off. And if it's relevant to what people are coming for, as long as you notify people that it's going to be dropped off, you should be all right. So examples of the objectives, we did talk about that at our workshops in the context. Don't be afraid to say that you're there to raise money for an event or just for you to continue to be a CRC. It's quite all right to do that. There's no shame in that. As long as people know it's fundraising, they'll be prepared to have their hand in their pocket and they'll bring a handful of change. If you're having a gold coin donation, just say you like little gold coins, much better than bigger gold coins, and you'll double your income. So you can actually play a bit with that sort of thing because people know what you're there for. It might be a community health and wellbeing issue. If that's the case, make sure that everything is focused to that with a bit of fun attached because that's part of the wellbeing. Sports and leisure, they're getting a little bit mixed at the moment, but like these big events that we're seeing, a lot of the international sports series, a lot of people get focused on what can go wrong on the pitch or on the basketball court and forget the governance around it. So you can have those objectives, but your objectives is also to run a good event and have people say that the organisation was really good and the committee did a good job, not just that the teams could turn up and play. And that we can continue our broadcast if it's an international broadcast without having to say, whoops, we forgot the due. So we'll be looking at that. Hobbies and special interests, that's pretty self-explanatory. Education or information, make sure that your event you have education and information. If it's products, produce or service promotion, you can focus exactly in that direction and people will know what to expect. And if it's regional or community promotion, promote the region. Don't hide your light under a bushel. We just recently did a survey for somebody who was inquiring about Busselton. And they were saying things like, do you think it's the poor cousin of the Margaret River? And do people only come through here to go there? And such like. What's obviously that's about is Busselton saying, hey, we want to be seen for what we are, not as the poor cousin. And they're doing all these things by surveying that to make that statement. And that's perfectly acceptable and perfectly all right. So let people know what you're about, and that's really important. And the last, just coming down to the last home straight on our slides here, when you're mapping planning activities, and this is kind of a summary of today's broadcast, it's about governance and management. And you will be asked, and I certainly know if you get events call money, you're going to be asked to demonstrate that you are doing your plans according to the Australian Standard for Risk, the ISO 31000. And the first half of that is about governance and management. If you're doing all these things, you will be able to send your plan through to Events Corps and you'll pass flying colours. It's not about what you're doing with the risks, it's more about how you're going about governance and good faith and management. And that's what protects you the most. You need to understand the scope and the context of your event to meet your goals. The logistics we've talked about in our event framework, you know, is like having the right people and the right skills and everything in the right place at the right time. And you need to have a review plan and you need to be able to monitor that. So, as I've said before, don't wait to the end to monitor it. You check in at every meeting. You use your action sheets to keep on track. You actually use checklists and ensure you've got records kept. If something goes wrong, you hand over all those records to the lawyers, and if it's going to incriminate you, it'll stay in the box and nobody will see it, but they will find things to defend you. So don't shred anything, don't do anything if something goes wrong. Freedom of information, that people have to know what they're looking for. They can't go fishing. So make sure you've got your records intact. And monitor all of the outcomes all the way through so that when you do it the next time, you'll have a much bigger and better event. And as a closing statement, we've just about come to the end of our hour together. So I would just like to sort of say that we've covered that taking a structured approach to your event, from the way you run your committee to all aspects of managing and implementing your event, you will minimise the surprises and you'll maximise the outcomes for your CRC, your community or your key stakeholders. I hope you enjoyed this presentation today and that you've been able to get some value from it and some ideas, tips and strategies that you'll be able to implement as soon as you get back to the workplace. Go back and have a look at what you're doing now, and don't forget to get those 2 resources of the committee things from Roz, and you'll be able to get on your way. The next session in our event planning and management series is held on the 4th of October, so same time, same station, 2 weeks' time. and it'll be covering the grants and sponsorship things, a lot about acquittals and things. Terry's going to share his vast experience and knowledge in that area, which he's gained by running 2 big and successful events in the Peel region. He'll also facilitate the following session on working with the media and the local business to promote your event to get some more continuity. And the next time I catch up with you, we'll be talking about risk management from the liability point of view. Liability being, what do we do after something's gone wrong? And we'll be talking about how to prevent something going wrong and also how to sort of minimise the damage, if you like. So think about any questions or information that you might like addressed in those sessions and get them through to Rosalind so we can include as much as possible of what you'd like to know in our programs. So it's goodbye for now, and we'll see you at the next session.